For centuries, historians believed that every word spoken by Jesus was already known. However, on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee, archaeologists have discovered something that changes everything. We have unearthed impressive remains of a Byzantine ecclesiastical complex. The church occupies an area of approximately 1.5 dunams. A revelation buried for 1,500 years exposes what Jesus secretly confided to Peter. Words never recorded in any gospel. During the Byzantine era, this magnificent basilica was built here and appears to be dedicated to the Apostle Peter. What they found was sealed beneath centuries of mud, hidden inside a forgotten church built by the first followers of Christ. And the message it preserved could rewrite one of the most crucial moments in Christian history. The mosaic Sob Alama. On the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee, not far from where the Jordan River flows into the lake, a team of archaeologists began an excavation that would soon make history. The site initially appeared empty. The shore was silent, the soil heavy with layers of clay accumulated over centuries of flooding. Several previous surveys had given up on the area, classifying it as unsuitable. But this new team believed something lay beneath. Local fishermen had long spoken of carved stones that emerged when the water level dropped, and the archaeologists wanted to know what lay beneath them. The excavation began in the heat of summer. The air smelled of damp clay and salt. Workers scraped the surface slowly, their tools clicking through the dense earth. For several days, they found only mud, shells, and broken pottery. Then, on the 5th morning, a shovel struck something smooth and solid. The sound was sharper than stone. They widened the trench, cleaning the surface by hand. A line of small tiles began to appear beneath the sediment. The colors were faint at first, then intensified as the water washed away the dirt. Over the next 2 weeks, the team worked in sections, exposing more of the structure each day. What they unearthed was astonishing. Thick walls, sharp corners, and a curved chamber at the eastern end. The kind of feature found only in ancient churches. According to his field notes, the exposed area measured about 1.5 dunams, large enough to accommodate hundreds of people. This was no simple chapel. It was a Byzantine church. When the conservators began to wash the floor, the room came alive. The mosaic below was almost perfect, its patterns crisp and colorful despite the centuries that had passed. Near the center, faint Greek letters emerged. A language expert read them slowly until the complete line became clear. Peter, chief of the apostles and holder of the keys to heaven. For a long moment, no one spoke. The words were not mere decoration. They were a proclamation fixed to the very heart of the floor. The letters were clean, the mortar untouched, the surface unusually preserved. Some team members believed the area had been sealed off to protect it. Others cautioned against speculation until further testing confirmed it. Still, one thing was certain. The mosaic had been placed there on purpose. As the sun set, the team covered the floor again to keep it safe. The lake shimmered silently in the distance. They left the site that night, knowing they had found something far greater than a ruin. According to their notes, one question remained in everyone's mind. To what history did this mosaic belong, and what kind of city once surrounded it? To answer this, they would need to look back in time to a place long mentioned in Scripture, yet absent from world maps. The city that the Gospels lost. The team believed the mosaic's message pointed to a name that has echoed through the Scriptures for centuries: Bethsaida. It was the city that, according to the Gospels, was once home to Peter, Andrew, and Philip. It was where Jesus first called his followers and performed many of his early miracles. However, at some point between history and time, the city disappeared. After the 1st century, its name vanished from all known records. Floods reshaped the northern edge of the Sea of Galilee, and the coastline receded from where it once was. The city that witnessed the beginning of the faith had been swallowed up by the earth and by memory alike. Ancient pilgrims of the 4th century tried to find her again. They traveled along the Galilean coast, guided only by stories, pointing to places where they believed Jesus once walked. Some marked the wrong hills. Others built small shrines in the hope that they had chosen correctly, but no proof ever lasted. Over the centuries, the city has become less of a destination and more of a mystery, a sacred ghost hidden beneath mud and reeds. In the 19th century, scholars renewed the search with maps and shovels. Two main locations caught their attention. One was in Tel, a hill almost 2 kilometers inland. The other was El Araj, a flat plain near the water. Each site had supporters and evidence, but none could silence the other. Etel had strong traces of the Bronze Age, but little from the time of Jesus. El Araj had Roman pottery and traces of mosaic floors, but flooding made study difficult. The debate continued for generations. Survey reports from the early 20th century suggested that both places contained ancient remains, but the findings were scattered and incomplete. Bethsaida remained lost, a city mentioned by every reader of the Gospels, but seen by no one. This began to change in 2016. A new international team returned to El Araj with modern tools and a clear objective: to resolve the issue once and for all. Using soil analysis and magnetic imaging, they detected dense formations beneath the surface, evidence of walls, roads, and foundations. When they dug deeper, they found pottery, glass, and coins dating back to the 1st century. Within months, structures began to emerge from the mud. According to some archaeologists, the layers revealed not just a small settlement, but a thriving fishing village that perfectly matched the time of Jesus. For the first time, evidence in the scriptures seemed to align. Bethsaida, the city the Gospels had missed, was beginning to return to the world. And soon the earth would reveal more than just buildings. The church under the coast. The team dug deeper into the ground, expecting small pieces of an ancient village. They thought they might find some broken walls, some pottery, or a stretch of road. Instead, the blueprint for a large early Christian church from the Byzantine period began to emerge. Day after day, one detail led to another. A short wall became a series of rooms. Stone circles revealed themselves to be the bases of columns, still fixed in place. By the end of the 3rd week, they had discovered a curved room at the eastern end, the area where an altar would have stood in an ancient church. That was the moment they knew it was a church and not a house or warehouse. The size surprised everyone. The floor extended wider than the small chapels known in nearby villages. The plan was orderly and balanced. The quality of the construction was high. When the conservators cleaned the floor, they found mosaics made of small red, blue, and white stones arranged in careful patterns. The sunlight made the colors stand out even more. This was no simple village prayer space. According to some archaeologists, it appeared to be a place built to serve many visitors. As they cleared more earth, they reached layers older than the church itself. Beneath the foundations, they found signs of a 1st century city. There were fishing hooks, weights for nets, and simple kitchen pottery. These items correspond to what families in a fishing town would have used. The findings suggested that a working-class community lived there long before the church was built. The church builders, it seemed, chose this site purposefully, not by chance. Written accounts helped the team understand the bigger picture. An 8th century pilgrim named Willibald wrote about an apostles' church by the Sea of Galilee. He said it was located where the houses of Peter and Andrew had once stood. For years, many scholars dismissed this claim. They said it sounded like a legend. Here, however, the site in El Araj matched many parts of its description. There were guest rooms. There were parts of a bathhouse. There was a large courtyard where travelers could gather. According to field reports, this was the first time that written history and evidence on the ground had aligned so closely. At this point, the team felt they were reading a layered story. First, there was a Roman-era fishing town. Later, a Christian community built a sanctuary over it. This choice made sense. Early Christians often built on sites they wished to honor. Some on the team believed this church had been erected to protect the memory of the apostles. Others said they needed more proof before making that claim. Everyone agreed that the location was not random. Still, one question persisted. Why had this specific spot been chosen with such precision? The answer, they would soon discover, awaited beneath their feet. A message written in stone, buried in the very heart of the floor. The inscription that spoke through the stone. The inscription was located in the center of the church's main hall. This space is called the nave. It is the large area where worshippers sat. A circular frame of small, shiny tiles surrounded a flat panel of text. The conservators slowly cleaned it with soft brushes and water. Letter by letter, the words came back to life. The team formed a semicircle around the panel while the Greek expert read it aloud in a firm voice. The text began as a standard dedication. It credited the work to a man named Constantine. It called him a servant of Christ. This language is common in church floors of the period. Then the line shifted. It honored Peter as the head of the apostles and as the holder of the keys. Everyone understood this. It echoed the verse that many believers know from the Gospel of Matthew. But the final words brought the room to a standstill. The inscription referred to the keys to the celestial spheres. The phrase seemed out of place. According to epigraphers on site, this wording does not appear in any known biblical manuscript. Linguists on the team said the term sounded like a very ancient idea. It pointed to a view of heaven in layers or kingdoms. Some scholars later suggested that the wording might reflect an Aramaic expression that early believers used when speaking about God's authority. They emphasized that this was a suggestion, not a proven fact. They said the phrase could have passed into Greek through local preaching before being written down. The team looked at the letters again. The cut was precise. The angles were clean. There were no corrections to the layout. The letter heights were uniform. This wasn't the quick work of a village bricklayer. It looked like text meant to carry weight. According to field notes, the lines were so clear that the floor must have been protected early in its life. This would explain why the surface shows so little wear. Others cautioned that only laboratory tests can confirm how long the floor was exposed before burial. The difficult part was understanding what the words meant. If the phrase preserved a local saying, then the mosaic might contain an echo of a teaching that never reached the written Gospels. Some on the team felt excited, others felt concerned. Some said privately that this type of statement would attract anger from more than one side. According to reports from subsequent briefings, the directors chose very careful language. They said the inscription expands on the known wording. They did not claim it changes the scriptures. Even without firm conclusions, the effect was immediate. The place changed from an interesting church into a place with the power to reshape debates about the role of Peter and about how early Christians remembered the words of Jesus. The letters didn't appear decorative. They looked like a message placed on the floor for future eyes. To understand why someone would hide such a declaration, researchers turned to the people who built this shrine and the faith that guided their hands. The faith that remembered where the words fell. In the early centuries of Christianity, believers did not use maps or written guides to find sacred places. They relied on memory. They built where stories said sacred moments had occurred. Churches were erected over caves, wells, and hills where people believed Jesus or his followers had been. This was not superstition. It was a way of keeping those moments alive in stone. The builders of these early sanctuaries saw themselves as guardians of memory rather than creators of something new. Throughout the Holy Land, this same logic shaped the geography of faith. The Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem was built above a cave said to mark the birth of Christ. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem stood on the hill where he was believed to have been crucified and buried. In Nazareth, the Church of the Annunciation honored the place where the angel spoke to Mary. None of these locations were chosen randomly. They were selected by generations who still carried living stories passed down through families, travelers, and local communities. The church in El Araj seemed to belong to this same pattern. Its builders chose land that older generations had already marked as sacred. They included guest rooms, a baptistry, and a large central space for worship. According to reports, these are common features in pilgrimage complexes that receive travelers who came to pray or seek healing. Every element of the design pointed to remembrance. Nothing about the structure suggested invention or personal expression. The builders wanted to preserve something they already believed had happened there. Some archaeologists believe the site reflects an effort to keep alive a spoken memory. The ground beneath the basilica may have been associated with events from Jesus' ministry. For them, the design of the building itself acted as a statement. Here is where the words once fell. They weren't protecting an idea, but a voice they believed had spoken on that very ground. In this vision, Peter was more than a disciple remembered in stone. He was the guardian of a promise given directly by Christ. The floor mosaic that called him the chief of the apostles may not have been mere decoration. It could have been a coded reminder of a conversation that early followers never wanted to miss. Some scholars remain cautious. They say that without written proof, no one can be certain what the builders were recording. But even they agree that the combination of architecture, inscription, and location points to deliberate preservation. The people who built this church weren't making history. They were transmitting something. And according to recent studies, what they transmitted may not have been just a title or name. It could have been the very words that Jesus once spoke to Peter. When epigraphers cleaned the final ring of the mosaic, faint letters emerged that no one had noticed before, and the meaning changed completely. The keys, the kingdom, and the hidden words. The final cleaning began with routine checks. Conservationists photographed the floor under normal light. Then the technical team brought in infrared imaging to scan the surface for faint marks. According to the field log, the camera captured a thin ring of text around the main inscription. It was very worn, almost invisible to the naked eye. Under infrared light, letters that looked like smudges began to separate from the stone. The room fell silent. An epigraphist traced the ring on a tablet, while a second specialist read the letters aloud. The text was incomplete in places, but enough remained to confidently construct the line. After multiple passes, the team wrote the reconstruction in a notebook. It read, "He said to him, 'Guard my house, for I am going to prepare the heavens.'" The words did not correspond to any recorded verse. The tone was personal. It sounded like direct speech. Translators worked through the grammar. They noted that the rhythm did not seem like later Greek. It moved like an older speech pattern. Some scholars in the study said the line fit the form of early Aramaic phrases. They suggested it could be a local memory that had been translated into Greek for the mosaic. They were careful to say that this was a proposal, not proof. Others in the group urged caution and said that more testing and peer review were needed. The sentence structure caught everyone's attention. It sounded like an extension of Matthew 16:19, where Jesus gives Peter the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Here the wording continued that idea with two clear commands: "Guard my house, and I will prepare the heavens." If the reconstruction is accurate, the first command points to Peter's duty on earth. It reads as a charge to protect the community of believers. The second clause suggests that Christ prepares the kingdoms above, while Peter keeps watch below. Some said this pairing implies a shared work that connects earth and sky. The emotional impact was immediate. Some team members felt shock. Others felt concern about how the line would be received. According to reports from the site, the directors chose to describe the find as an early local tradition that preserves an expanded form of a known promise. They did not call it a new scripture. They did not present it as a final conclusion. Even with careful language, the implications were strong. If the inscription records an early saying remembered in Galilee, then the mosaic would be the first archaeological artifact to carry a direct spoken line from Jesus to Peter. Some experts believe that he redefines the role of Peter. He is not merely a doorkeeper who binds and looses. He becomes an administrator who guards the house of faith while Christ completes the preparatory work in heaven. The team resealed the floor for protection and sent images to external reviewers. Within days, the news began to spread beyond the site. As the news spread, debates reignited through seminars and pulpits. What did these words mean in relation to everything Christianity had taught about Peter, the apostle who never lost his keys? For 2,000 years, the question of Peter's authority has shaped and divided the Christian world. Entire branches of faith have been built around how his words and role were understood. For some, he was the very foundation of the church, the chosen leader to carry the mission forward. For others, he was one among equals, a symbol of faith rather than command. The argument over his keys became one of the longest debates in Christian history. In the centuries that followed, these differences grew wider. The Eastern and Western churches disagreed about what Christ had intended. In the West, Peter's primacy became linked to leadership, an unbroken line leading to the papacy. In the East, his role was seen as spiritual, not political, a first among equals rather than a ruler. Later, during the Reformation, Protestants read the same verse differently again. They taught that the keys were not a mark of one man's authority, but a shared symbol of faith open to every believer. However, none of these interpretations could erase what archaeologists found beneath the soil of Galilee. The inscription at El Araj was not written in Rome or commissioned by emperors. It was placed by local believers, carved in stone, centuries before the divisions of the church even existed. And back then, long before councils, schisms, and reforms, Peter was honored exactly as the Gospels described him, head of the apostles, bearer of the keys, and guardian of what Christ began. According to reports from early translations, the wording carried a weight that seemed both personal and cosmic. It did not present Peter as a ruler of men, but as a guardian of balance, the administrator of faith on earth, while Christ prepared the kingdoms above. For theologians, that idea changed the conversation. It showed that early Christians near Galilee already saw Peter's calling not as power, but as service. Even critics who doubted the hidden saying agreed that the mosaic could no longer be dismissed as mere legend. It was physical, local, and ancient. A voice from the earliest centuries of belief. The discovery forced a silent reckoning. The church in El Araj had not preserved a doctrine, it had preserved a memory. And through that memory, Peter's story had come full circle back to the shores where it began. Today, the question is no longer just about what they found, but what it means for those who believe. Was this a message intended to reshape faith, or simply to remind us of its roots? Perhaps that's for each reader to decide. What do you think this discovery reveals about Peter's true role? Was he destined to lead or to guard? Share your thoughts below and let the world know what you believe the keys truly mean.